The sun hung low over the canyon, bleeding gold and crimson into the jagged stone walls. Heat shimmered off the dusty ground, and the air was heavy with the smell of sagebrush and dry earth. A lone rider moved slowly through the winding path, a man whose broad shoulders and towering frame made even his large stallion look small. They called him Bear McGraw back in the border towns, though most folks simply referred to him as the giant cowboy. He wasn't just tall, he was massive. His hat's wide brim shadowed a face carved with hard years, his eyes a pale steel that missed nothing. He carried a long rifle in a saddle scabbard, and a massive revolver rested heavy on his hip. Out here, between law and wilderness, a man needed both. Bear had been riding since dawn, tracking the faint trail of some rustlers who had hit a ranch near the river. His canteen was running low, and his horse, Dust, flicked its ears nervously as the canyon narrowed. The cowboy's senses sharpened. He knew these lands were Apache territory, and a stranger was rarely welcome. As he rounded a bend, something caught his eye up ahead. At first, it looked like a strange formation of rock, but as he drew closer, his gut twisted. Two figures were slumped against a massive flat stone, their arms drawn back at unnatural angles. He reined in sharply, the stallion pawing at the dirt. They were women, young, their long dark hair tangled and dusty, faces pale with exhaustion. Their wrists were bound tightly behind the stone with rawhide straps. They wore simple buckskin dresses, now torn and dusty from the rough treatment. Bear slid out of the saddle without a word, his boots crunching on the gravel. He approached slowly, his eyes scanning the cliffs for movement. An ambush here would be easy. The women stirred as he got closer, one raising her head just enough to look at him. Her lips trembled. "Go," she whispered hoarsely. "It's a trap." The other woman shook her head slightly, as if warning him to save himself. Bear's jaw tightened. "Who tied you?" he asked in a deep, even voice. "Our tribe," the first woman managed. "Punishment for refusing marriage." Bear's steel-blue eyes swept over the bindings, noting the cruelty of the knots. He could see the marks on their skin. These straps had been tight for hours, maybe longer. He reached to his belt and drew the large hunting knife he kept there, the blade gleaming in the fading light. "You're coming with me," he said simply. The women's eyes widened, not in fear of him, but in disbelief. Before they could protest again, Bear crouched behind the stone and sawed through the rawhide. The first strap snapped, and the younger of the two women nearly collapsed forward, catching herself with a gasp. He cut the second woman free as quickly as he could, but kept his ears tuned to the canyon walls. Somewhere far off, a rock clattered, the sound of someone moving. "You can walk?" he asked, sheathing his knife. The older of the two, maybe in her early 20s, nodded shakily. "We can, but they will follow." "They can try," Bear said flatly. Dust snorted nervously again, and Bear turned to help the women toward the horse. The stallion shifted under their weight as he lifted one, then the other, onto its back. They were light, far too light, and it made his gut burn with anger. "Hold on to each other," he ordered. As he swung into the saddle behind them, a sharp whistle echoed down the canyon. The women stiffened. "They've seen us," one whispered. Bear's eyes narrowed. "Then we don't waste time." He spurred Dust forward, the stallion leaping into motion with powerful strides. The canyon walls rushed past as Bear kept one hand on the reins and the other near his revolver. Behind them, faint shouts carried on the wind, growing louder. They had not gone more than 100 yards before an arrow hissed past Bear's ear, clattering against the stone. Another whistled overhead. He leaned low over the women, shielding them with his body. "Keep your heads down," he barked. The canyon began to widen, offering less cover but more space for Dust to stretch his legs. Bear knew the open plain lay ahead, and if he could reach it, his rifle and the stallion's speed would give them a fighting chance. But the shouts were closer now. Glancing back, Bear caught sight of 4 riders appearing from around a bend, bows drawn, their ponies kicking up dust. The younger woman whimpered, "They will kill you." "They'll have to catch me first." Bear growled. Dust thundered across the ground, each stride eating the distance to the canyon's mouth. Bear's mind worked fast. He needed to reach the high ridges beyond the plain before nightfall. The women were exhausted, and he had no food or water for them yet. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. Another arrow zipped past, striking the ground inches from Dust's hooves. Bear pulled his revolver with one hand, twisting in the saddle. The first shot cracked through the air, the sound booming off the stone walls. One pursuer's pony reared, throwing the rider to the dirt. The others veered slightly, but pressed on. The women clung to each other, their eyes wide with terror as the chase roared on. Bear fired again, forcing another rider to drop back. That left two still gaining on them. Ahead, the canyon spilled into the vast open plain. The horizon stretched endlessly, the grass rippling in the wind. Bear urged Dust faster, feeling the stallion's muscles surge beneath him. Once in the open, he twisted again, this time pulling his rifle from the scabbard. In one smooth motion, he leveled it and fired. The shot dropped one of the remaining riders. The last turned his pony sharply, vanishing back toward the canyon. For a moment, only the pounding of Dust's hooves and the women's ragged breathing filled the air. Bear slowed the stallion just enough to keep him from burning out completely. "You're safe for now," he said over his shoulder. The older woman turned slightly, her eyes studying him. "Why would you help us?" Bear didn't answer right away. His gaze stayed on the horizon, scanning for danger. Finally he said, "Because leaving you there would have made me no better than the men who tied you up." The younger woman's voice was barely a whisper. "What will you do with us?" Bear's reply was steady. "First, I'll get you somewhere they can't find you. After that, we'll see." As the sun dipped lower, painting the plains in firelight, the giant cowboy rode on, two frightened women clinging to him, and a promise unspoken in the wind. The plains stretched endlessly ahead, a sea of tall grass rippling in the evening wind. The sun had almost vanished, leaving a thin band of orange on the horizon. Bear McGraw knew that once the light was gone, the real trouble would start. Behind them, the canyon mouth was now just a dark scar in the distance. But Bear wasn't fooled. Men who'd leave women tied to a stone wouldn't give up that easily. He'd seen their type before. Apache warriors were fierce in a fight, and these ones would see his rescue as an insult to their pride. They'd follow, even if it meant riding through the night. The two women sat in front of him, their bodies tense. The younger, no more than 16, kept glancing over her shoulder, as if she expected arrows to appear out of the darkness at any second. The older woman stayed quiet, her dark eyes scanning the plains, with a look that told Bear she was thinking 3 steps ahead. "You got names?" Bear finally asked. The older one hesitated before answering. "I am Nayeli. This is my sister Sani." Bear gave a small nod. "All right, Nayeli, Sani. We'll ride for another hour, then stop. Can't have Dust running himself dead." Sani spoke softly. "If we go east, they will find us. West, there is water, but also white soldiers." Bear's eyes narrowed. "Soldiers won't be our problem unless they make themselves one. Right now, it's the men behind us I care about." They rode in silence after that. The only sound, the rhythmic pounding of Dust's hooves and the wind whispering through the grass. The stars began to show, bright and sharp against the darkening sky. When Bear finally slowed the stallion, they had reached a low ridge where the land dipped into a shallow basin. There was a trickle of water from a narrow creek, and the grass was thick enough to feed Dust for a while. Bear dismounted, then helped the sisters down. Both swayed on their feet, their muscles stiff from hours in the saddle. "Sit, drink," Bear said, handing them his canteen. They obeyed without a word, gulping the water like it was gold. Bear tied Dust to a nearby tree, gave him a few mouthfuls of grain, and then began setting up a small fire. He kept it low, shielding the flame with stones so it couldn't be seen from far away. When the fire crackled to life, the smell of sizzling bacon soon followed. Bear noticed the way Sunny's eyes followed every movement, her hunger plain. He handed each of them a share and watched as they ate in silence. After a while, Nayeli spoke. "You should not have helped us." Bear raised an eyebrow. "I'll take that as a thank you." She shook her head. "You do not understand. The men who left us will not stop. They will take us back, and they will kill you for shaming them." Bear chewed slowly before answering. "I've had men want to kill me before, still here." Her gaze didn't waver. "They are not like white outlaws. They will follow for days, weeks if they must." Bear looked into the fire, thinking, "Then we make sure they've got nothing to follow." They rested for a few hours, but Bear kept waking to scan the horizon. Just before dawn, his sharp eyes caught movement far off, dark figures on horseback, riding low and fast. He cursed under his breath. They'd found the trail sooner than he'd hoped. He saddled Dust quickly, rousing the sisters. "We ride now." The morning air was cold, biting at their faces as they galloped westward. Bear led them toward the foothills, where the land grew rough and broken, terrain that would slow the pursuers. By midday, the chase was closing in again. Bear could hear the distant drumming of hooves, and now and then the war cry of their hunters. He knew they couldn't outrun them forever. It was time to make a stand. He found the place he was looking for, a narrow pass between two rocky outcrops, perfect for funneling riders into a kill zone. He dismounted, pulling the rifle from its scabbard. "You two hide behind those rocks," he ordered. "Don't come out until I say." Nayeli hesitated. "You can't fight them all alone." Bear allowed himself a grim smile. "I'm not planning to fight fair." The sisters scrambled to cover while Bear positioned himself at the narrowest point. He stacked a few loose stones for cover, then lay flat behind them, rifle resting on the rock. His breathing slowed as he watched the dust cloud of the riders grow nearer. When the first warrior appeared in the pass, Bear fired. The man dropped instantly, and the others pulled up short, startled. Bear chambered another round and fired again, forcing them to scatter. They tried to flank him, but the rocks made it impossible to ride more than two abreast. Bear picked his shots carefully, each crack of the rifle echoing through the pass. After 10 minutes, the survivors pulled back out of range. Bear knew they'd try again, but they'd think twice before charging head-on. He retrieved the sisters, and they mounted up once more, heading deeper into the hills. Bear chose routes where the rocky ground would hide their tracks, weaving through gullies and dry riverbeds until the sound of pursuit finally faded. That night, they camped in a sheltered canyon. The firelight flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows. The sisters seemed calmer now, though the fear in their eyes hadn't fully left. Sani curled up to sleep quickly, but Nayeli stayed awake, watching Bear as he cleaned his rifle. "You risked much for us," she said quietly. "Why?" Bear paused, wiping the barrel with a cloth. "I've seen what happens to folks left for dead. Sometimes all a person needs is someone to give a damn." She studied him for a moment. "And when you are gone, what will happen to us then?" Bear met her gaze steadily. "You're not going back to that stone, not while I'm breathing." For the next 2 days, they traveled without seeing another soul. Bear began angling northwest, toward a small settlement he knew, a place where the sisters could find safety and maybe start a new life. On the 3rd morning, as they crested a hill, the town came into view, a cluster of wooden buildings with smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint sound of a blacksmith's hammer ringing in the distance. The sisters stared at it as if seeing another world. For them, perhaps it was. Bear led them down into the main street. A few townsfolk looked up, curious at the sight of the giant cowboy escorting 2 weary native women, but no one said a word. Bear stopped in front of the boarding house, helping them down. "This is where we part ways," he said. "You'll be safe here. Mrs. Kelly runs the place. She's got a heart bigger than Texas." Sonny's eyes filled with tears. "We have nothing to give you." Bear shook his head. "Didn't do it for payment." Nayeli stepped forward, her voice steady. "Then take this, a promise. If ever you are hunted as we were, we will stand with you." Bear's mouth curved into the faintest of smiles. "Fair enough. He tipped his hat, mounted Dust, and turned to ride away. As he left the town behind, he didn't look back, but he knew they were watching. Somewhere out on the plains, there were still men who wanted his head for what he'd done. But Bear McGraw had long made peace with the idea that a man's worth was measured by the lives he saved, not the ones he took. And in a land where mercy was rarer than rain, that was enough.